OK. All right. Welcome back. Bienvenue pour cette deuxième session sur le BIM ou la transformation numérique pour les municipalités, openBIM for municipalities in Canada. So municipalities are at the front line of, buildings, the built environment, in that they own, they deliver, they maintain, a large majority of assets that directly impact the quality of our citizens' lives, and so they face tremendous challenges in maintaining these assets. And, again, we had a discussion. The first session was all around how do we, at the federal, international, federal, provincial levels, organize ourselves. Well, where do municipalities fit into that? In Quebec, the municipalities are part of the roadmap, but there is sort of the common or distinct challenges that need to be discussed. So as a response to this, buildingSMART Canada has developed or put in place the Municipal Infrastructure Council. And I'd like to invite the director of the Municipal Infrastructure Council to come and say a few words, Gord McElravy, who is on the board of directors of buildingSMART Canada. Thank you, Gord.
Well, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today, in particular, or particularly with the executive committee, both present and also virtually online, that are part of creating this organization, the committee within buildingSMART Canada. So I could speak on this all day. What I'd like to do is really, in 2 slides, give you a background on the MIC program, how it came about, and so on. So if I could have the first graphic. And I take it's this. Should be there. Excellent. Okay, really what I want to do is I want to speak to this graphic and how it came about, what it's supposed to achieve. So I come from the practical world. My life has been solving problems about introducing technology, about data interoperability, about doing projects, putting teams together, and making it work. And maybe my gray hair helps explain that it started in a manual world, and I came up through everything. And history consistently repeats itself. So there has to be a way to make it better. And I've always believed the way to do that is engage municipalities early in the process. So I went with an idea, and I went to about 30 organizations across Canada, different levels of government, academic institutions, innovation hubs, and private corporations, floating the idea of a partnership that engaged municipalities and all of the sectors that they deal with, which was every organization I was speaking with. And what would it look like if we could put that partnership together? And what's very important, what type of an organization could be the catalyst for that? The organization that would put it together, perhaps create an innovation portal and hub from what's being done in it. And I asked the question, could buildingSMART Canada be that? Are we a neutral body? Even though we're a standards-based body, are we an organization that they would see as non-threatening that could introduce this type of a program? And the response was absolutely. buildingSMART Canada would be an ideal organization to bring this together. So I went back to the municipalities and said, if we were able to put together a municipal infrastructure council, what would be the objectives and what would this structure look like? And they came back really with the graphic that we're seeing there. So what they said was we need it operated and run within buildingSMART by the municipalities for the municipalities. And buildingSMART should be there as a representative body, a standards-based organization consulting and inputting to the real world day-to-day projects that we're engaged in. We already deal with all of these other organizations. We have 64% of the public infrastructure in Canada. What we need are three key things, and they came out yesterday. It was interesting. What's the message that we're giving about BIM, particularly in the municipal world? BIM is only now addressing linear infrastructure. To a municipality, by far, it's linear infrastructure they're introducing. So what have we to introduce to them as we're just starting to develop in that area? They wanted us to be able to put it in practical context, engage with them in real-world projects, and look at the strengths and weaknesses of the solutions that we're speaking about, the standards we're talking about, and document what does and does not work without worrying about failure anywhere. But work with them. And a big thing they said, we want you to listen to what we're saying, and we want you to learn from it and apply it in the projects that we want to work on. So we said, excellent. What's the structure look like? They said we should form a membership of municipalities. They would take out a membership, one of your levels of membership in buildingSMART. They would initially make a larger investment, of which some of that money would go into projects, and obviously some of the money to support the operations of buildingSMART Canada and its international commitments. From that general membership, an executive would be formed, and there would be 3 levels of individuals that we had to pay attention to and had to prepare the documentation and the material that was relevant to the challenges that they were having in their respective areas within that organization. And regardless of the organization, it was the technical people that worked on the projects, it was the mid-management that dealt with the policies and the documenting and the contracts, and it was the politicians. So they suggested 3 groups, a technical working group. So we said, okay, infrastructure council rooms, a policy and standards group for mid-management, and an advocacy group for promoting what was being done in those projects, the results that were coming from it, the documentation that we were getting, and being able to take that and communicate it to the community at large. So the structure they put together, the diagram on the left, how we approach it, and there were 2 other things they said. Approach it from the way a municipality and a government agency would approach it. Methodical and take your time. Go with the pace that the municipality goes with. Work with them on this. Excuse me. The second thing they wanted is they wanted to ensure that in implementing the standards, that we worked with them at what standards they were dealing with, and tried to look at a rational perspective of the capabilities of what we could offer, and document what the changes that needed to happen, and how to feed that back to the international community and the national community as a whole. So from the administrative point of view, they said you should choose an executive first. And the executive should have 2 conditions associated with it. It should represent the key areas within Canada geographically. So if we look at the west, the central Quebec, and the east. And it should also have municipal partners that have experience in BIM, are working on BIM projects, or down to municipalities that are just dealing with GIS, starting to deal with interoperability, and starting to hear the word BIM. So there's the executive you need, and we're very pleased to say that in putting together the executive and the incredible participation over the year, the City of Calgary representatives, the City of Kingston, Ville de Québec, and the Halifax Regional Municipality. So the 4 principal municipalities came together as an executive, and formed the executive committee in that diagram and started to look at how would that work and how would we need to change as we start to move forward. In discussions with the executive, the first question became, what's the first thing we do? And the collective said what we should do is we should produce a document about BIM in municipalities, and I'll speak to that in a minute. So how would this concept work? The idea is that the municipalities that are participating in the council have capital projects on the go right now. So engage more municipalities, look at the capital projects that they have on the go and the budgets associated with it, and try to create a collaborative environment where they would look at those projects and say they're of interest to X number of municipalities. Why don't we collaborate together? Why don't we work, perhaps pool our budget dollars, and bring in the partners from academic environment, bring in the partners from industry, and bring in the partners from government, and bring in buildingSMART Canada, and let's put together a project that will document what we're doing, the practicality of it, in relation to the 3 levels of individuals within our organizations that have to understand that and then go out and communicate that to the industry at large. And that's exactly what we're trying now to start to put in place. The first decision was then to look at, we have to produce something, and a great thing to produce would be a document for BIM for municipalities in Canada.
There we go. And so that's the cue for the white paper, and we'll get
Alors
right to
c'est
the presentation.
sur
Thank
de
you very much,
l'alerte
Gord.
pour
So
les papiers blancs.
this white paper is available
Alors,
online
c'est-
at the and thank you. So you can see Gord is very passionate about this Municipal Infrastructure Council, and he's been the driving force behind it. So thank you very much, Gord, for the detailed explanation. So we'll start right away. We're starting with the City of Kingston and their third crossing bridge. So we're mixing municipalities and infrastructure. So we're going full on in terms of BIM for infrastructure in municipalities. So I'd like to invite Dan Franco, who's projects engineers for major project office at the City of Kingston, and François Villeneuve, who's CAD manager BIM specialist at Sistra IBT. Thank you very much. Merci.
Thank you. Oh, we got 2 things here. Look at this. Good morning. My name is Dan Franco, and I'm a project manager for the Third Crossing in Kingston. I've been on the job for over 10 years during the planning, design, and construction phases.
Hi, I'm François Villeneuve. Je parle français naturellement.
I speak English naturally. Je suis un manager chez Calm, chez Sistra IBT. I've been constructing BIM models vertically at first and now horizontally for this project, as you can see.
We would like to take this opportunity to show you what the third crossing looks like from the south elevation. C'est belle. So then the city went through a naming campaign and selected Waubin Crossing as the formal name, which will be used once the project is open in December, which is 2 months away, so we're really excited. Sister helped us design that, by the way. Thank you. The city used an integrated project delivery model for the final design and construction of the project. And IPD has an owner, designer, and contractor working together to determine if the project can be done within the target cost while sharing the potential risks and rewards of the project. Only a handful of IPDs have been done in North America, with Kingston being the first to use IPD for a bridge project. It's worked out very well. One of the deliverables of the validation phase was the development of a BIM execution plan, which provided instruction and on what would be modeled, but also how to organize it. So we went through several revisions in 2019 there on the left. You can see my name all over the place there. And then on the right was the resource allocation from various team members that would be needed for the BIM. The project team collaborated on what we developed using a shared workspace with ProjectWise, which contained all design information for the model and how to actually organize our files. So, for example, on the left, we had like work in progress models, we had IDR or interdisciplinary review coordination models. Then when our models are actually finished for those deliverables, we had published models. And on the right, we had our model deliverables at each design phase. So we had a validation phase model, a 60%, 90%, and in this case, IFC is issued for construction deliverable. Then we're still working on a post-construction BIM model. It was important for the city to understand how the BIM would integrate into our overall city information model. The majority of the job, fortunately for us, was able to be taken care of in the Bentley software suite for modeling the components, but also knowing that we needed to access those components with software that we would have to use once construction was over. In this particular case, there was a dedicated program we had to use, which is Tekla for the main span, and that's what that red circle is showing us, and Francois will talk about that a bit later. The model progression followed a predetermined course that provided us direction on where our model was at each particular design phase with the help of suffixes. So you don't have to memorize all this, all right? But there's a alphanumeric kind of code we used. For example, for components in the model, you'll see we're highlighting a bridge scupper there on the bottom with identification and suffixes in the bottom right corner. So reading this text string tells us what version the model and the block we're actually working in and kind of the direction that we're actually going. And in this case, we're doing an IDR for the actual IFC drawing itself. So that's those little numbers in the corner there. So one of the key advantages of using the IPD is that it promotes a highly collaborative work environment. We all have to get along, you know. So the design phase is allowed an interdisciplinary review process at each design phase that allowed the team to collaborate and work together to develop, to provide comments on the designs as a group, but also be able to see everyone else's comments live in the 3D model space. So here, what we're seeing on the screen here is, after the 5-day review period occurred, we have all these little comment bubbles in the plan, and the comment bubbles will refer to the comment dialog box in the right-hand column, which will tell us what the concerns were from the team members. So we would get together as a team and resolve all the comments that we could at that particular design phase. So if we're at 60% design, and we weren't actually all the way done, so some of the comments had to be deferred, to later phases of the design phase. And then we would address it once the progression of the design occurred a little further. Now, the key benefit of using BIM here in the 3D model space was conflict resolution and identification. So we know where our pipes are going, if there was a pier in the way or whatever like that. And then that really saved us a lot of money and heartache when it came down time for construction and enhancing our construction methodology. I'd like to take this time to pass on to Francois to talk a bit more about the main span. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Merci. Okay. So the next part of the presentation is going to be focused on the main span of the bridge, which is the part that is in focus here, right? It's the part that we at Sistra design. It's the thing that is a little bit special about this zone is it was architecturally a little bit more challenging than the rest. You can see it's like a main arch in the middle, and you have 2 half arch in each side. I'm going to talk here about the softwares that we use to generate this BIM model. We use Tekla, like Dan said a little bit earlier. So this is our main authoring software. So this is where our BIM model resides. So we use Tekla to integrate all the properties in the objects to be published in IFC further down the road. And we use this to leverage that inside the BIM collaboration tools. We use Tekla as well to generate reference drawings and so forth. You'll see further down as well that the model is LOD 300, is just because it was required that way in the BIM execution plan, but Tekla had the ability to push it further to LOD 400 if ever it was required. Next software is the little bug and the little animal you're seeing here. So this is Rhino and Grasshopper. So this is a parametric modeling suite that interface with Tekla because Tekla doesn't have parametric modeling. So for those who doesn't know what parametric modeling is, it's like using algorithm to automate stuff inside your model. So it's really crucial in the design phases to be able to mitigate changes in the design. And the last one is Larsa 4D. So this is our analysis modeling suite. And we build the bridge inside there to check everything that was, make sure everything was up to code and specification as well. So this first slide, so the key steps in the bridge model development. So we see here, it's, you see the bridge alignment and the bridge center line as well. So bridge alignment is kind of the backbone of the actual bridge. So we have to get that specific file from other discipline, and we have to trim it down to have only the part that we're doing. So in this case, right, the main span you saw earlier on the slides, it's really a small part of the bridge, so we had to break that down because the road alignment contains everything, like the roads and everything that construct the bridge. So next step, so authoring. So in this case, I'm kind of showcasing Rhino and Grasshopper. So Grasshopper is the purple thing you see in the middle. So that is the algorithm that allows us to kind of generate all the bridge along the bridge alignment. So you see at the bottom we have the deck and the asphalt. This was all generated through Grasshopper inside Tekla. There's no manipulation inside Tekla to generate that. So next slide is the next step was to create a substructure. So here the step looks fairly easy, but the challenge on that specific bridge was this pier 18 and 19 that you're currently seeing are not perpendicular to the bridge alignment. So it created some form of challenge you'll see later, but it was really crucial to get these two really down on an earlier stage. So next step was creating the four girder that we have here. So they kind of look maybe similar to your eye, but since the geometry of the bridge is on a certain path along the road alignment, and then the piers are on an angle, like I just said, that creates four different girders. So we have to mitigate that using the parametric modeling again, and the algorithm to make sure that everything was in place and everything was done in a speedy fashion. Next slide. So you see, I don't know if you remember, but we're kind of slowly building the bridge. So this was meant to showcase how many diaphragms and bracing there is inside the bridge. So there's 534 different parts, and they are all unique. They all have their own working points, and it's all doing in a specific, it's all following the geometry of the girders. So that was really a challenge, and again, we use the algorithm to allow us to create this and to be able to deal with changes, right? Without having to redo these 534 parts over and over again each time there was a change. So here we see a zoomed in version. So you can kind of see at the bottom of the pier, you see the bracing there. You can kind of see that there's the geometry is a little bit funky. So it's just the nature of the geometry that was like that. And you have a plan view as well for reference. Last step for the authoring. So it was putting the final touches. Like you see here, you have a 3D lamppost that was provided by another discipline. So we could integrate a 3D model brought by somebody else inside our BIM model. We have the railings, we have the guardrails as well. Everything was modeled in, again, using the algorithm. So that specific part, so that is the part of the analysis. So this was modeled in Larsa 4D. So it was done for beam elements using variable characteristics and the study of the bridge, dynamic behavior, and different loads. I'm not going to dwell too much on that. Naturally, or maybe I could say unfortunately, but we have to do design drawings from the BIM model. So here we see the 75, or an example of the 75 drawings we have to do, because this is still required. So that specific rainbow bridge. So this is a fabrication model that was done by Tenka for Walters Group. So they kind of reproduced the bridge inside their own software because they didn't want to use the BIM model. In this case, the BIM model could have been used, it's just that they choose on their own not to do so. So we have as well, so this was done for for fabrication, so creating the files required and the drawings, the shop drawings required. So, but we also have at Sistra the ability to do this part. So we could have leveraged the BIM model to do the shop drawings as well, instead of redoing it. So, as a proof of concept, we did real-life imagery with drones. So we leveraged the BIM model to create a flight path, because our BIM model is geo-reference. So we were able to create a flight path for the drones. So the person just had to go on site and start the drones, and the drone has a predetermined path to follow. So this was the result. So this is a photogrammetric model. Sorry, I have a bit of an issue with this word. We were also able to produce a point cloud. So the point cloud is useful for us to bring back inside Tekla to validate if everything is at the right position on the field. And we can have multiple iterations of that specific point cloud to follow if ever we need to follow the construction sequence. So that's another example. Another thing that we can leverage with what we did with the drones, you can see here on the left side, you have the photogrammetric model, right? And on the right side, you have a picture. So on the left side, it's actually a 3D model that you can turn around and go different places. But you can also pinpoint at a specific area and then bring the image that the drone took of that specific place. So in this case, I just shown one image, but you have the ability to have a lot of image. It can be like 5 or 10 different images of different angles of that specific point. So it can be useful for asset management as well further down the road. So lessons learned. So that's my best slide, I think. So that's what we learned doing this particular project. So first of all, doing 3D BIM for bridge takes more time than a regular 2D drawing, because when we do 2D drawings, right, we can put a couple of examples of a specific situation, and then after that, with tables and descriptions, we can kind of have these typical section applied to the entire bridge, like the 534 parts that you seen earlier, right? But when you're doing a BIM model, you have to model in all of these different parts. So you have to take that in mind and be mindful when you start the project. It's going to take more time to do it in BIM. Second point, be careful not to implement detail too soon in the process. Again, being a 3D modeler, I tend to want to add everything from the start, right? But the nature of the design phase means that what you're currently adding is probably not going to be there in the final run, or it's maybe going to be on another detail or something different that you're currently doing. So you have to be mindful of that, because, right, you may have to redo everything a lot of times, right? So sometimes if the BIM model at the specific stage doesn't require for that specific detail, hold off as long as you can to integrate it inside the BIM model. 3, use parametric modeling with restraint. Again, right, sometimes parametric models seem super nice and it's in its automation and everything, but sometimes creating the algorithm is actually longer than manually doing it inside the software, inside Tekla in this example, right? So just always be mindful that the time you're spending doing the algorithm needs to be leveraged further down. right? If it's not, then you're wasting your time. 4, having clear milestone to coordinate all the discipline model is a must. So this is really useful because when you're creating your BIM model, having the other discipline model at the same time and not a couple of months later, right? It allows you to do your coordination right away better and know what the problems are coming before going into fabrication. And 5 is better communicate impacts of change and ways to prepare what's coming. So that is, inside the firm, you have to explain to everybody that doing it in the BIM is a different beast than doing it in the 2D drawing. So you have to explain them, you have to manage the changes as well, making sure that they are aware, hey, what you're currently asking me to do will take me 10 hours, right? Are you really sure this is what you want to do at that point in time, right? So that's it for me, Dan. Back to you.
Thank you, Francois. So the third crossing BIM will contribute to Kingston's SMART goals and Smart City goals by integrating into our city information model. So I know Phil's in the crowd there. We're excited to test out the data and interoperability of the BIM and the SIM in Kingston's geo-referenced and structured digital twin environment. So Kingston envisions the value of the digital twin for running simulations such as emergency planning, natural disaster events, simulating strategic planning scenarios where buildings and things of that nature go, and then also with our asset lifecycle management programming. Here's to the future. Thank you.
Very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much. So, combination of IPD, BIM, digital twins, smart cities. I think this is very inspiring and great to have the City of Kingston on the Municipal Infrastructure Council. The next speakers are from the town of Oakville and ACO Innovation Lab. They will come and talk about the town of Oakville and BIM submissions. So the whole regulatory compliance part, which is, I know there's a regulatory room here today and tomorrow, and so how are municipalities in Canada moving towards that? So Ralph Kaminski, who's Chief Building Official at the City of Kingston, town of Oakville, apologies, and Arash Shahi, co-founder and CEO of ACO Innovation Labs. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being with us today. I have with me Ralph Kaminski, Chief Building Official for Town of Oakville. We're going to be talking about development approvals, and that's a topic that hasn't been talked about yet, but it really sits at the intersection of the AEC industry and our governments, and that's basically what ACO Innovation Lab was formed to do. So when we formed ACO a couple of years ago, the idea was to bring in academia, industry, and government together to add some of these fundamental digital infrastructure gaps that exist within our sector. And our focus has been in that intersection between the AEC and government. Just to give you an overview of what we've done over the years, our flagship research project is One Ontario. This is where we brought in about 40 different associations and organizations together in the province of Ontario, and then expanded that across Canada to work on the challenges that exist on development approvals and why does it take so long to actually get a permit for a new building project. Before ACO, I spent about 6 years at the University of Toronto and had a research center there on building innovations. And in that capacity at the time, Ralph was heading the Large Municipalities Chief Building Official Group, LMCBO. And we collaborated on a few different projects together. And Ralph, if you want to talk about our experience with the EDAP project, perhaps?
Sure, I can start with EDAP. I'd just like to say that Arash and I are eggs up here, not chickens. We may be a little bit intimidated by this awesome group here and the fantastic conversations that we've heard over the days, but we're eggs, we're pioneers. We're not going to show you a roadmap of where we're going because we're not there yet. What we have rather is a vision, an idea, and places we want to go. When I prepare to talk to a group of people, I always have an idea of what I'm going to say, and it's never what I plan on saying. my brain is so full of awesome ideas that I can't keep track of them. And I can tell you over the last 2 days, it's only been a day and a half, but the conversations I've heard and the information that I've heard, my brain is just ready to explode. So if I seem a bit disorganized, that's because of the awesome information that was shared here and the incredible opportunity that lies ahead of us. What we're talking about here is trying to create, what we started actually was an electronic development approvals process we called EDAP. And that was where we collected a group of building officials from across the province and chief building officials from across the province to see if we could get together and come with some standard data information so that we could start communicating similar as we're trying to do here with BIM. What we quickly discovered is that chief building officials and building officials, we can't agree on anything. So we need to outsource this. We need to find someone to manage our conversation, to contain our enthusiasm, to help us get focused and look at some of the information that's out there. I'll switch it back to you, Arash, and you can speak to the rest of it, and then we'll...
Yeah, one of the things that we learned through that exercise was that, and I like Rolf kind of talking about that because I don't want to be over criticizing the chief building officials, but there was not a whole lot of movement from municipalities to agree on things. So we kind of came up with this strategy of translation, and the headsets that you have kind of have the same model where we decided, you know what, let municipalities do what they do, and let's put a translation layer in the middle so we can start communicating. We also did a number of different projects with a number of different municipalities. I won't go into details of that, but what we're trying to show you today, it's been in the works for many, many years. One of the things that we did, we spent about 4 years, looked at every e-permitting system internationally at the time. So we looked at East Asia to Europe to US and see what every municipality is doing. We put them into 3 categories. Category 0 is paper. That's where our Canadian municipalities were not too long ago. Level 1 basic e-permitting is digital submission of 2D drawings, so paperless but very manual. Level 2, BIM submission, so submitting a BIM model to municipality for approvals, and then level 3, BIM and GIS integration. A lot of jurisdictions globally have moved towards levels 2 and 3. In Canada, we still don't have municipalities moving towards that, and that's our goal, to bring in that next generation development approval system in Canada. Just to paint the picture of what the problem is, we've got different stakeholders in that ecosystem who, especially after COVID, have invested very heavily in their digital infrastructure. So we have municipalities who've spent millions in e-permitting systems. You have regional governments, conservation authorities. None of those systems actually talk to each other. There is zero communication between all those systems that are in place. Now, I'm glad that we have some federal representation here, some provincial representation from Quebec. Unfortunately, the rest of the provinces, I don't think we have a lot of provincial representation here. But the idea is, in other jurisdictions around the world, it's always a top-down approach. We need federal leadership, we need provincial leadership to actually get this done. Because in Ontario, at least, the province has basically pushed that authority down to municipalities, but the problem is municipalities actually have no jurisdiction over conservation authorities and all the other stakeholders. So it's basically a call for help from the top leadership in Canada, federal government, and federal agencies to get involved and help municipalities push this forward. Based on international best practices and based on where we are here in Canada, we've kind of came up with this new model of development approvals where you have a single portal in front. So instead of every municipality having their own portal, every regional government, every conservation authority, we push everything into one portal up front with a data exchange standard behind it, and then that connects to all the different stakeholders. Now, if we want to move towards BIM submission in this country, this is the only way to do it, because we cannot afford to have every municipality come up with their own BIM portal and the BIM standards. And that's why this is an interesting audience for this idea, is because we need buildingSMART Canada to put in place BIM standards that can be adopted Canada-wide and basically provide that standardization opportunity up front. So we'll talk about that. We're going to be presenting again tomorrow afternoon when we'll talk about this idea of One Ontario and how we can expand that. But we've also been working with municipalities to create digital visions for developer approvals. We've also been working with Oakville specifically on piloting what a BIM submission would look like in a Canadian municipality. So with that, Ralph, I'll pass it over to you. Maybe just talk about the journey that you've had at Oakville, and then I'll take it back.
Sure. So our journey actually started not in building, where we're trying to pick up the journey, but in our planning, which we're really excited about because planning is the first in the approvals process. Our planning department, not the actual department, but some members of our team, of the planning team, started to experiment with Google SketchUp and created some model so that they could understand what their rules and regulations meant and the impact they would have on their approval process. They then went to City Engine, learned some more technology there. They found that there was a steep learning curve, but it was a very powerful tool. Thought we'd investigate this a little further. 2019, they began to develop a three-dimensional modeling, and I think they followed a system that was used elsewhere in the world. I believe Finland used a similar approach using LiDAR to capture their municipal infrastructure. We continue to build on that with additional applications to try to add more value and improve the information. While I'm hearing all this story, I'm thinking, why are we doing this independent of the technology that's out there, the BIM models that are being created? So I see that there's still the municipalities are going on one journey with their planning approvals, but they're missing a tremendous opportunity to work with the infrastructure that's being created by the modeling firms that are out there right now. Just a further example, the latest version was in 2022, where we started to add some VR to fancy things up and have the other jurisdictions understand the importance of modeling, what information we can gain from that modeling, and what opportunities we can take advantage of and actually change the way we do business. So recently we moved to ArcGIS, where we've been working to take our zoning bylaw and integrate it with our mapping system so that an applicant could actually look at the site and put their model on that site and see if their model actually fits on that site. I believe Halifax is a little bit ahead of us on this model. They have some great success with that taking place. We're trying to use this to also make better planning decisions. What we're trying to do with this BIM pilot project that we're undertaking right now is, rather than responding to what the industry has and developing a system to give our approvals based on that, we want to work with the industry and develop an approvals process that is in harmony with the standards that are being developed today. I noticed on a couple of examples we talked about design, construction, and then asset management. From my perspective, we're missing a piece, and that's the approvals piece. The approvals piece comes during the design process, but definitely before construction and then during construction. So I think it's important for this group to consider that and expand into other government agencies, bring them to the table, and understand what process they go through to grant their approvals, whether it's the Transportation, Conservation Authority, or whatever agency happens to have influence over that project. My understanding, and it's been told to me, that government moves slow, that there's a lot of information lost when we move from two-dimensional to three-dimensional drawings. So from the design team to the construction team, if you're not using BIM, there's a loss of data and information. When you're moving from the construction team to the regulatory team, there's even more information lost. So what I'm hearing here is that with the design and the construction working together, we've really been able to improve that curve and make some great headway, but there's still a gap with the regulatory team. What we're hoping to do with our pilot is to say, can we elevate that line? Can we fill that gap and use that information to our advantage to accelerate the approval process and to make better decisions? One day I'd like to see that regulatory team be on the same side as the design and construction team. I think as long as we're still of the mindset that design and construction is independent of the approval process, we're going to have delays in our construction. I've learned a lot of cool things about the abilities of BIM and what it can do in the modeling. I think those opportunities will allow us to make better decisions and make faster approvals. What Arash was talking about with the portal is right now we have exactly this, a very decentralized approval process. We have a large group of players that are involved in the approvals process, but none of them are talking. When I get the approval from the Conservation Authority, I don't get it directly. The applicant receives it, brings it to me. That seems like a tremendous waste of effort if we're asking the applicant to go to each one of our approval agencies to get their approval and bring them to me so that I can offer a building permit. We're looking to create a portal. In Oakville, we did our best effort to create a portal, as I think many municipalities did. But what we've created was a portal that only works internal and only works for us. Specific so that it only works for the building department. Our portals, unfortunately, aren't even integrated within the town of Oakville. So we're looking to change that. We're looking to see if there's an opportunity to create a portal that will be beyond just the building department and beyond just taking two-dimensional drawings. I think Arash is described as creating a three-dimensional portal that accepts two-dimensional drawings. So with that, I think I could talk here all afternoon, but we're 6 minutes to go, so I'll turn it back to you, Arash. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. I think that's a very key differentiator of having 2D portals that are 3D enabled, or change that on its head and come forward with a BIM portal, BIM GIS integrated portal that's 2D enabled, and that basically sends a message to the industry that we are moving towards 3D. We're going to support you during that transition by still accepting 2D, but the future is 3D, the future is BIM and GIS integration, and I'm really glad that we have now municipalities that are thinking that way. Now, one of the areas that's unique in this project is the collaboration between applicant and the regulatory system. So instead of you designing something and submit it to municipality and ask them to basically enforce the building code per se, why don't you work with the municipality and demonstrate how you're actually complying with all the codes instead of them checking for them? And that's a concept that Rolf has been working with us to implement. I said, can we have a very different development approval system where we actually collaborate with the municipality and the government in the design process? And that's what our vision for the future portal is. It's a portal CDE. It's going to be a common data environment where the applicant and the municipality can share information, BIM information, and then we can connect that same CDE to the owner industries and to whether that be government agencies or whether that be any other entity that actually needs to owns facilities, be able to push that towards to them as well. So it's all about collaboration. I'm just going to move over here so I can see the slides. We're also thinking about how we can streamline that process. So instead of waiting until the construction documents are ready before we submit to municipality, can we engage earlier with the municipality? Can we have these micro reviews, if you will? So what we start with on the design side is a BIM specification. So we need to come up, and that's where buildingSMART comes in, to actually provide a set of BIM standards where the industry can adopt. And the benefit here is right now we've got municipal and sometimes regional standards. If every municipality has its own standards, it's no longer a standard, right? We actually, and it's going to be very difficult for the design community to comply with every different municipality's standards. So what we're proposing here is national standards, national BIM standards that we can actually, the design community could invest in adopting, and that's where automation comes in. We've done a pilot with Rolf when he was at a different municipality on looking at automated code compliance. It's about 50 to 70% of our building codes can be automatically checked if there's a BIM standard in place so that everybody submits in the same format and with the same requirements. So we're running out of time, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. But the idea here is to have these micro reviews instead of one major review. And I'll explain maybe in the next slide. So when the applicant, here's basically a mock-up of what it would look like to have a BIM-enabled development approval system. From an applicant side, you'll submit your projects. You have a view of all the projects that you've submitted. You're able to submit your files for a pre-check. So one of the complaints that we always heard from municipalities was that the quality of submissions are pretty low. So applicants just submit something to get into the door. The design isn't complete. So what we can do here is the idea of a pre-check. So you submit your IFC model, and we can basically check against a number of different provisions of building code or the Planning Act and be able to verify not just completion, but also the quality of submission, and a number of checks can be automated. So with that automated tool, then it moves towards a collaboration space where municipalities can start providing feedback. And then this is the examiner view. So they see a number of applications, they can look at the BIM model in a BIM viewer. And what's perhaps most interesting here from a building department perspective is that a lot of the checks that the building department does on a submission could actually be facilitated and a lot more streamlined with a BIM model in hand. So things like checking for fire exit distances, having been able to bring the building code right up there. It took us about 2 years, a year and a half to 2 years, to convince the provincial government of Ontario to allow us to digitize the Ontario Building Code, the Volume 2 of the Building Code. These are the challenges where we can't really wait for government to take that long to move forward, and that's where we could use some federal support and other provincial support in actually moving things forward. But there's other checks, for example, fire separation. We were working with the building department, and they were showing us that they take these manual steps of highlighting and color coding fire separation on drawings so that the inspectors, when they go on a site, they can check it relatively easily. Well, that information resides in BIM already, right? So by accepting a BIM model and by setting a standard of what color coding you actually want to put in place, that information is already there. You don't have to do that manual work at the municipal. These are just specific examples. There's many of them where having a BIM submission could help facilitate the development approval process. Of course, BIM GIS, being able to evaluate a building within its urban context. We all know the benefits of that. Being able to have a data-centric approach, have a database of your city in a SIM environment. How many buildings have geothermal? How many buildings, what are the energy efficiencies? A number of different dashboards that you can run at the city level once you have this information in there. And of course, simulations. So being able to simulate what different planning configurations could mean for the city, from resilience planning to land use, a number of different opportunities there, disaster recovery, the list goes on of what you can do at a municipality if you actually have that information. With that, I would like to acknowledge the collaborations on this project. It was a project between ACO, Town of Oakville, and buildingSMART Canada, specifically Claudia Cosdorto, who did a lot of the heavy lifting for us on this project, and Gord for his support. And also, we have a number of different industry partners on this project. And it's basically an open invite to everybody else, whether it's your government or the private sector who want to work with us in this next generation development approval system for Canada. We would love to have as many collaborators on this as possible. With that, here's our contact information. Happy to engage with you afterwards. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
So very inspiring, and we're seeing things sort of congregate and converge. Our next speaker is online, and we got practice yesterday, so hopefully he should pop up right there, and his presentation should pop up right now. Oh my God, amazing. So Justin Pockar, who's the manager of customer solutions and business registries at the City of Calgary.
Okay, boys,
all right, so just whenever you're ready.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Justin Pockar. I'm from the City of Calgary, and I'm really happy to actually follow the last presentation because I think we'll be following on a similar theme with a slight variation on it. So we're going to talk about a few things today, largely what BIM is going to do for us, how it's going to help us, and how we can work it into approvals. This is something we've been kind of toying with as an idea in the last couple of years, but we are kind of slowly progressing to making it a reality. So hopefully that will come to fruition soon. I'm going to start by making a hypothesis, which is if I'm going to build a better building by building a smarter airplane. This is a photograph of the Boeing 787 assembly line, and as all of you I'm sure are aware, this is a fairly unique piece of transportation technology in the sense that it is the world's first all-carbon commercial airliner. Moreover, and much more to the point we'll be making today, it was designed exclusively using a BIM process, obviously, and an integrated design process by the Boeing Corporation, with some very modest, or what seemingly might be modest performance gains. I believe, if I remember the numbers correctly, it was approximately a 6% increase in fuel efficiency and a 15% increase in relative cabin humidity were its design objectives. And it probably for most people seems like a very expensive $4 billion to make those performance gains. But what I'd really like to talk about is the actual thought process that went into a construction such as this. And I guess I'm just going to make a few points that I think are really critical when we talk about the 787. And I want to note that it was designed entirely by best practices with performance goals. We don't have a dummies guide to building commercial airliners. And when we refer to buildings, that is often not the case, because I think for a lot of municipalities, a lot of designers, bylaws or municipal development guidelines and building codes are their dummies guide. And I don't think they should be. They are actually the minimum standard you must attain. I think the other thing that's important is to realize that it is not, while Boeing does take credit for that, not every component is designed by Boeing. Quite the opposite, actually. Designed by a number of firms, all integrating their parts into an overall assemblage. And I think that's critical because I think in the world of construction, number one, I think that already happens on a fairly substantive basis, but I think in the future with the idea of pre-manufactured buildings and assembly lines or factory assembled buildings, that we are definitely headed in that direction. And the most important one I think I want to work out is the realization that the precision in design leads to a precision in assembly, and that inevitably led to a lower cost. And what I mean by precision in design is it was worked out on paper or digitally, paper being a euphemism in this case, well before construction started. And I think that is critical, and it follows well on the presentation that was just given, which talked and used a lot of critical words that I will be repeating, which is that of collaboration. And the idea of how to actually look at approvals processes for buildings and essentially enable the latter statement on this. So I think in order for buildings to shift into a world where they are more like 787s, we need to start talking about integrated processes. And that means integrated in the full sense of the word. For the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to be referring to BIM as a process and not as a technology. Ironically enough, I've shared this with many of my colleagues. I could just sit in someone's office and do the exact same process that we'll be outlining today. It would just be grossly inefficient. BIM is the enabling tool, or the tools of BIM are what enable this to be done in a reasonable way. But it's actually the process that we should be focusing on, in my opinion. And I think that was really touched on by the gentleman from Oakville when he used the phrase breaking down the barriers, as I think we said, between regulatory authorities and design teams. And I could not agree more, and I think that's what we'll talk about today. The last part I think we need to understand is performance goals for buildings are vast and diverse. There are obviously objectives related to the performance of a building, i.e. its thermal performance, its ability to keep moisture out, etc. Life safety is clearly one. There's also economic measures, there's scheduling, there's marketing metrics. I had a great discussion with an architect from Denmark the other day, and he was quoting someone else, but it was a great statement that said, we engineer our buildings for a 500-year lifespan for structures, yet the marketers will often have them a 20 or 40 or 50-year lifespan. And a truer statement has probably never been said. And I think that's something to be considered. So if we are treating BIM in the sense that it is a communication enabler, then we have to talk about drawing information as well as lines. And I think that is what BIM really does offer. Again, as I've said, BIM to me is much less a tool or a technology. It is a process, and it is a process that is intimately linked to the integrated design process and integrated project delivery. And I think we have to be able to, as an industry and as approving authorities, be able to make those connections automatically. And I think last of all, and this applies most particularly to the construction industry, because frankly every other industry has already embraced it, but BIM is a tool that can change how we do business. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So I refer to this section as an evolving approvals, and I'll explain what I'm getting at and really the drivers behind anything we would be doing in this space. I'm sure everyone has seen the wonderful graph in front of you. It is kind of the justification or the rationale behind integrated design processes and often BIM processes. I'm really going to ask you just to focus on two lines. One is the black line, which shows the ability to impact a project, and you will note its decay over time. And the other one's the cost of design changes, which is the red line, and you can see that rapidly increasing over time. What is often not flagged when we look at this graph is the profound statement that this is actually as good as it gets. This is an idealized graph right now. This is not the dirty parts of reality graph that show this kind of drastic change in the relationship over time. This is the perfect one. In reality, and now I'm going to speak a little bit more Calgary specific, but in reality, we actually have a much, much less congenial curve. And that's due to a couple processes. We see what I've called a DP and a BP, which is our shorthand for development permits and building permits. When I submit a development permit, my ability to make changes plummets. I effectively, a development permit in Calgary essentially says this is the massing, the shape, the fenestration of my building, what I'll be using it for, how many suites it'll have, the parking density, all of those calculations. When I submit a DP, I have essentially locked my building down. Moreover, because I have almost no assurity of what I am going to be approved of at that point, I have done effectively zero engineering on it. On the building permit side, the BP, we see a drastic increase in the cost of design changes. The rationale for that is because the development permit process takes a significant amount of time. By that point, when you apply for a building permit, you have already locked down the drawings. You are probably well into cost considerations and specs. That means your ability to make those changes now typically is accompanied by a significant increase in cost. Our thought process is, well, if we can, instead of having two precipitous drops, have essentially what amounts to a service level agreement, but talks about multiple sequential reviews, we should be able to smooth those two curves out in a much, much more reasonable way, pushing it closer to the idealized model. And again, as I mentioned before, while I could do that by literally lording over an architect and engineer's desk, that would be grossly inefficient. BIM is actually the tool that enables this process to exist. And the process we are kind of hashing out right now is one that talks about taking a project all the way from pre-application to delivery, using multiple reviews and living in essentially the applicant's drawing world. So us going to them instead of them bringing it to us as they have in the past. And what we feel this will offer us is actually a change in philosophy from that of being gatekeepers to being one where we can watch a project evolve due to many of those performance requirements. Again, if I'm going to ask you to recollect something I said a few minutes ago, which is if we only used one metric to talk about the performance of a building, i.e., let's say building safety, I wouldn't need this. But when a building factually responds to a number of drivers, cost, markets, demand, energy performance, a large number, I have to be able to have those sequential reviews and essentially solve multiple problems at once. And what I like about this drawing is it shows that notion that says as the design progresses and it's responding to all of those drivers, we can, as an approving authority, offer the kind of corrective guidance to put it back onto the track that is going to kind of optimize it in collaborative, in a way that works for both the city, the municipality, and the developer. You've probably heard me use the word a couple times now, and I think what we're really talking about in that guidance step is the ability to be a collaborative part of the tool. And again, I realize and I applaud the gentleman from Oakville for bringing up that exact same concept, because I think it is a critical shift in what we need to do. But to me, when I actually think of the collaborative model of the future, I would put approving authorities as one of many inputs we would talk about. That includes design requirements, the consulting industry, customer needs, and that means market drivers, economics, all of the other parts that developers and people who pay for buildings care greatly about, but certainly the approving authority. And that approving authority to me means both the planning department as well as the building department. And with that in mind, so what we've proposed essentially a challenge for ourselves, and that challenge is collaboration. And I'm going to walk through this statement. It'll be, I promise you, the only slide I read. But it's worth noting because I think we'll talk about some of the key features here. And the question we've asked is it feasible to build a parallel approvals process that combines the DP and BP into a single permit utilizing BIM processes and tools to give continuous feedback by a single team dedicated to a project to facilitate higher performance, more economical building in Calgary? I know that sounds a lot like a mission statement, but I would like to just break it down for a second. I think the first point, and you can see all the words in red, I think it has to be a parallel approvals process. I think it is farcical to ask everyone who's building a deck or developing a basement to do a BIM model. I don't think that is appropriate. I don't think that's a good use of anyone's time. However, if you're building a $2 billion cancer center, which is something we're just wrapping up now, it very much is worth your time to put in place a BIM process and a BIM review tool. The idea of combining a development permit and a building permit into a single construction permit, to me, is very important because, again, utilizing a single permit means we will be able to essentially say we are going to solve both development issues and safety issues and all of the other performance drivers, hopefully in one fell swoop. And it also makes the documentation significantly easier. The BIM processes and tools, hopefully for everyone here, is quite obvious. And that continuous feedback model is, again, using multiple reviews instead of having just those single gatekeeper DP and BP reviews that we currently use. And again, the driver for all of it is to afford those applicants the ability to build higher performance and more economically. In terms of can we do this, I believe the answer is yes, but we need changes in tools, expectations, cultures, and processes, which is a very large order for a municipality to make. We are moving in this direction, and what I've kind of come to know this as is an integrated approvals process. And when I put this on what I kind of lovingly refer to as the totally boring to super cool spectrum, I believe the gentleman from ACO referred to it as a 0 to 4 model. But the idea of going from paper to PDF format, which is essentially just digitized 2D drawings, to a BIM model that is submitted in a non-integrated approvals scenario, to a full integrated approvals process, that to me is really when I refer to the parallel process idea, what I am referring to. I think using our conventional processes, simple projects can benefit tremendously. And I really, to be very blunt, I don't care if it's a piece of paper or a BIM model. If it's the process that is remaining constant, then really the tools I use for analysis are very flexible and essentially have limited gains. It is when I move to those complex processes that use an integrated delivery model that we can really, I believe, capitalize on some of the changes we're making here. In order to move towards this integrated approvals process, now clearly we can't do that in one fell swoop, and we can't throw out the other one if the intent is to keep a parallel process. So we've actually outlined a 4-step process. We've completed steps 1, and we have laid the foundations for step 2, but step 1 is essentially using, it's getting our staff familiarized with BIM and review software. So using things like Navisworks, et cetera, to be able to comment on 3D models and using the 3D model or the BIM model as a single source of truth within our existing processes. pilot 2 will be essentially accepting a new building permit process, new building permit application in our existing tools using BIM tools. Later on, and this is as we build our secondary process to this, the integrated approvals process, we will be talking about doing combined development permit and building permit reviews of a city-owned project, and we're asking it to be a city-owned project in order to reduce the risk to private developers. And a inevitable stage is the fourth phase of the pilot is a full DP-BP review with public engagement. One of the hallmarks of developing in Calgary is we do have a very elaborate community engagement process. And again, if we think about that integrated design process, one of the things that you will have to address in developing that is how you deal with public commentary and don't treat them as a veto. And that is a very critical step for us. Inevitably, the question comes up of why are we going to invest all of this time and effort into doing this? I think it's very simple, to be very honest. I think an integrated approvals process has a number of benefits, and I will simply allow you to read them, but I think notions of responsiveness to the applicant. I love the idea of giving people choice, and that's why we like the idea of a parallel opt-in process. I think collaboration is not only a necessary precondition for these things, I think it is the way of the future, and as every other industry has shown us, a much more effective way to deliver a product. I think it's going to be faster and flexible and help us do things like combining multiple codes and documents. And I like the idea of a dedicated team, and that means we would essentially have consistent interpretation and consistent messaging throughout that. And again, that is really one of the strengths of a BIM, an integrated design process system, is the documentation of the concerns. You document it right in the document, or right in the BIM model, as opposed to sending emails or letters or templates or forms or one of the other things that bureaucracies are famous for. The last one, of course, minimizing paper records is just a nice to have. And I guess perhaps the best way I can illustrate this is talking about a bit of a story. And if I apply for a building today, I essentially will be applying for two separate things, a DP and a BP. And then at that development permit, I'm going to do a land use bylaw compliance check. I'm going to finalize my building facade. The number and size of commercial retail units is fixed. I will do a cursory, at best, life and safety building code compliance check and have virtually no engineering from which to do it from. At the building permit phase, all of a sudden, I am now shifting gears entirely on my applicant and looking for how they are going to construct this building. I'm going to verify that they didn't change anything, even though they've been working on it for 10 months, which seems ludicrous to me. We will also be reviewing all of the engineering, and as a byproduct of that, generally, the applicant uses this as their tendering. What this does is, again, thinking back to the evolutionary model, it means that we are really stunting the ability to be flexible and make essentially non-drastic changes to a project, or drastic ones, on submissions that are often, and I'm not exaggerating, years apart. It is not uncommon for a development permit to sit with us for 12 or 16 months, which means the world has moved on, yet your project is ironically frozen in ice like a caveman. In a world where we can do an integrated process, or integrated approvals process utilizing BIM, all of a sudden the DP actually becomes the pre-application process, where we will be talking to the community to ensure their buy-in, to secure enough confidence that we can proceed this, thus giving the applicant an enormous amount of assurity, mind you. And the one permit submission, which would be that construction permit, is now going to address all of the development and the building permit issues simultaneously, allowing the information to be filed through the BIM and developed in accordance with the optimized economic schedule for the project. And that changes on every project. Moreover, because of the multiple opportunities for review, we can provide corrective guidance from an approving authorities, as well as be open to a number of suggestions. Hence the term change is encouraged. Integrated team discussions of acceptable solutions are done. We will be able to prioritize issue and optimize schedules with strategic partial permits. that is, I'm going to stop sharing now, but that is my thoughts in the process. So,
Justin. I think it's very inspirational to see, putting the process first and then the technology to support it comes second. So I think that was a great reflection on how to change things and actually using technology as a driver to enable that change. Our next speaker is from the City of Quebec. It will be a presentation in French, so there are simultaneous translation for those. So just step outside if you want to get a headset. You'll need to provide ID. So le prochain présentateur, c'est Pierrick Varnier, qui est team leader.
Pierrick Varnier. Title in English, Pierrick. The City of Quebec is coming to talk to us. We've heard a lot about the level when it comes to the permit level aspect. And here we will talk about how municipalities can deliver these assets and maintain them. Do you hear me well? Thank you. Hello to all. I'm very happy to present to you, to make this presentation. I have the chance to follow my colleagues and to show you how the approval of permits function. On my part today, I will talk to you about the using of BIM, how we store this information and how we store it and how we maintain that information. So it's in a construction phase. I am very conscious of the responsibility that I have today to bring you to lunchtime. Hopefully I can keep you engaged and give you a dynamic presentation in order to bring you till the break, to maintain you till the break. There will be 4 parts of this presentation. So we'll talk to you about this history of BIM in the City of Quebec. The City of Quebec is part of BIM. Since 2015, the Videotron Center started using BIM. The goals that we had on our governmental roadmap has been very well set. I will show you now statistics and the mesonorm and the isonorm. What are the phases of maintenance and construction? So I will show you the steps, the implementing steps that we are using in our municipality. And if I do have the time, I will show you the applications, how we apply this in a project and what is the result. So we are lucky to be part of the BIM, of the roadmap, the city's roadmap for BIM. We have delivered 13, 14 projects that have been realized and who are about to be finished, but were completed with BIM. We're talking about very varied, diverse projects. We have the smallest project is 2 million and the biggest one is 370 million. So you see that it's very diverse. I'll talk to you about the park. We have so we have 1,600 buildings which are handled with $34 billion. For the City of Quebec, it's a huge amount. I will show you the importance of exploiting this real estate park. So the first thing to do when we do 3D is to have the right information, the right people at the right time. So we want to build a construction with the proper models, quality models. But for our vision, we noticed that it was really important to put information in the middle of our process. First off, to have the proper information. When it comes to the right person, we're talking about the person who maintains the building. The right moment is the quickest time possible. Little review. Small statistics here on what is being said in the isonorm. Hopefully, there will be more scientific articles on BIM in the future. Before I talk to you about what is being said and what is being written, we have a multiplicity of activities. In terms of this presentation, it's going to be maintenance. So the link is done in ISO 150, and today we're going to talk to you about the management of. So there's also literatures when it comes to our information. This in particular comes from the UK. It gives you plus value and different challenges in BIM and maintenance. Couple of plus values. Of course, it ameliorates manual processes, makes them more mature, more efficient. We see a gain in terms of the precision of information. We have better information, more precise information, and more useful. We also have the efficiency of the work groups. We've also made gains in quickness and efficiency. In terms of the challenges, first, a lack of processes in place. So we have to define them. A lack of clear responsibilities, especially the responsibility of those that are doing the update. We talk a lot about it in ISO 1950 in terms of picking up information. It's not always representative as built. We receive plans, but the plans aren't always up to date in comparison to what is in new documents. Our teams are on the ground, and they need to know and they need to integrate their new technologies in order to make them more efficient. When it comes to the ISO 650 norm, I'm going to show you in the first part the concepts and principles. The contractors, notably the municipalities, have to define. It is up to the municipalities to define the information. So it's very important in our process. In the fourth process, I will talk about the exchange of information. This is where we underline. This is where we attribute each. So we want to make sure that each piece is connected to its proper system. Now, concretely, when it comes to the implementation, we'll show you what was being implemented in our company. We're talking about technology, processes, and humans. All of them have been considered in the process. Of course, technology is important, but you need to think about the human being that is at the center of this enterprise. Just a reminder of the traditional form. So you have paper documents. We're very lucky in our lives to have had that. But you have many documents that are delivered at the end. We gather all of the information that was gathered throughout the project. We send it to our team. We tell them good luck, and this is the manual that you will use to maintain the system. We are happy because these systems have been upgraded. We do not give paper anymore. We give PDFs, and it's a good step. But now the next step is the digitalization of our documents. This is the traditional process, but I will talk to you about the new process that has to be put into place. A few questions. We want to take our information and transfer it to the exploiting team. Which information? There are millions of them. Now, which ones are important? How to collect them? And who will handle this information, as well as who and how it will be updated. Now, you can see many words here, which is different information. You can have hundreds of information in a project. Now, we ask, firstly, what do you need? What information specifically do you need when you start? We noticed that thousands of informations are needed, and so we were left with the responsibility to reduce this information. We started with thousands of information and reduced it to hundreds. When it comes to the selected data, firstly, I'll talk to you about the information, how we keep it. So the first one are the ones collected by the engineers, architect. They have to identify the building, the degree, the resistance to fire, that is a very important information, the parent system, which parent system, where are they, and as well as a code. The most important here for us is that we give them a list of 200 tools. 200 tools that are very important for us in terms of operations. Professionals consult that list. If one of the tools are part of that, then they can identify codes linking to those parts. And then with these codes, they're able to identify what they're going to work at, what they're going to work with, identification codes, description codes, so we know which tools we are working with because of those codes. So this information is very important for the maintenance team to be aware of. Then so the City of Quebec will add this information afterwards, following what the contractors have done. Now, when it comes to the IFC models, on each, we talk about the construction phase, there is an automatic phase, and a delivery phase. How to transfer this data? The process is, well, there are many solutions, just to tell you how to transfer solutions. But what we wanted to do is we looked at the existing solutions in this city. For a municipality, a software change can be quite tricky. So we use Excel, we extract the information, send it to Excel, we then restructure that information, restruct it in another Excel document, and then send it to our Maximo system through IBM so that the system is able to reorganize this information. So we have, in our third annex, we show that it is conform to the ISO standard. How to exploit this data? So if someone is in an exploited team and a maintenance team, how will they exploit this data? There are three types of supports. There is technical documentation. We use PDFs. We don't put all the information in our models and our GMO system. There's always in technical documents.
So the idea here is that you need to understand that there's information in each of these systems, and the objective that we gave ourselves with these neural networking is the kind of like how our brains work. We have an idea, there's many ways to access that information. It's not always the same route we're going to use to have access to that information. So in the same way, a user can, by using these systems, refine the information that's available in the system and do it. How concretely that translates is URL addresses in our SharePoint software with all the others that we're using, Maquette 3D and GMO. So a user that's in Maquette 3D will have access to the GMAO system and the documents technique. So overall, when there's a technical document on a specific case, you can have a URL link that'll lend you to those three other systems, and this effectively allows us to have access to the right data. Now, for the updating of the data, there's not much time left. It's a subject that we often talk about, that we think about. There's many ways to update the data that are internal. They can be done directly by the provider of that data. It can be done by the maintenance of the internal programmers, etc. A major issue is updating data, and that's something that must be treated or addressed. I want to talk to you a little bit about the application in a project. We spoke about a little bit of the traditional process with paper. Now let's talk about digitizing that. And in the last minute, I'll talk to you about the last process that's implemented in our projects. When I say we have 13 or 14 projects, because we have a building that we did in two projects, so it's 13 buildings, 14 projects that had been using BIM. We took that compared to the traditional method using BIM, and our project was the Pavillon of Services in Pont. People living in Quebec do know this. We're next to the Saint-Charles River. It's a quite a moderate building size, so we could implement many new processes and examine things correctly, examine things correctly, or analyze things correctly. So when I was talking about the 15 types of informations per equipment, well, all these informations are in the equipment themselves. So when we compare this process, the traditional process, with a more improved process, if we can call it that way, first and foremost, we asked our operation teams and maintenance teams to do the regular information that they take normally. They took the plans as they were designed, 2D, and they went and got the information from the GMO system, which represented 52 types of informations with 13 equipments. So this was the traditional method of doing it. Why these equipments in a very precise manner? Well, because there was an issue since the beginning of the delivery of the project and immediately after the delivery of the project to have a preventative systems implemented for the ventilation and heating system. These are information that were acquired. This is what's done traditionally, and it's usually done afterwards when the operations of the building take place. When there we go. So traditional gives this. Now, with regards to the improved process, at that day we had 89 equipments that were identified, which 114 informations or processes that could have been digitized. And final point I want to finalize with this is that these are the requirements for the information. These are the informations we've required of the entrepreneurs. This is what they provided us. We asked them to identify only 89 equipments, which represented 1,114 equipments, but they gave us 2,277 informations. That means there were many equipments that were not identified, and they have added them to this database. So this is very interesting. The entrepreneurs themselves, the contractors, are able to provide much more information than we could have expected in this modeling system. We started with 52 informations to 2,277 types of informations, and this is all done digitally, and it's all done automatically, so you can imagine the amount of efficiency would increase. This demonstrates the process. Obviously, this process is implemented for all of our projects. This is a redefined or reimagined building. It's a project for 100 million, and it'll represent hundreds of thousands of different types of information, so the potential is quite expansive for teams. I had a small conclusion, but overall these are some of the issues in the implementation of the 7D type of project. Overall, I think that you could just read them. I don't need to really go through the details. Some important details that we need to address, or some issues that we can't ignore. More importantly, the quality of information and the risk of wanting too much information. So what's pertinent is to select only the important information for the specific project. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Pierrick. Merci beaucoup. So this morning we've heard from federal, from provincial, from municipal instances around their digital transformation efforts. We've heard from the U.S. representatives also. This brings us to lunch. So lunch is on the 4th floor if you wish to go up. We will start at 1:30 again with openBIM for infrastructure and transport. Thank you very much.